If I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon.
He was a baby. He was my baby.
Run! Run! Run!
The Trayvon Martin case remains in the headlines across the U.S. Here today to talk about the latest developments with us, James Peterson, Director of African Studies at Lehigh University. Welcome back.
Thank you.
We've
Good
talked
morning.
about
Good
this,
to see you.
Talked about this issue before, and of course, this just isn't going away.
It is, and well, there hasn't been an arrest of Mr. Zimmerman yet, so I think the family still is looking for justice, and we're seeing a lot of the case now play out in the media, unfortunately, with comments coming from the Zimmerman camp trying to frame the story from their perspective, and obviously the lawyers and supporters of the Martin family trying to frame the story from their perspective. But in all honesty, if we could get an arrest of Mr. George Zimmerman, I think that would be one step towards us resolving all of the tensions around this case.
It seems to be the more information that comes out, the more confusing and the more questions there are.
See, there are more questions than answers right now. I think the one thing that's clear is that Mr. Zimmerman should be arrested, and that we really need to look very, very seriously at the stand your ground law and all of the cases that have used the stand your ground law as defense in using lethal force. So I think those two things are what we want for justice. In terms of the case, I think it's in the best interest of the family and honestly of Mr. Zimmerman for us not to litigate it in the public and on media networks. I think it's best for that to happen in a court of law, but that's unfortunately not.
Well, it's, you know, you win in the court of public opinion as opposed to the court of law.
Well, but here's the problem with the court of public opinion is that influencing that, how are they going to find 12 jurors if this case ever gets to trial who haven't seen and heard all of this stuff?
You know, lawyers are really crafty and really quite good at jury selection, actually. So it will take some time, but I think they'll be able to do it. But again, you know, the wheels of justice won't begin to turn unless we can arrest Mr. Zimmerman. And we have to remember that part of the reason why we're delayed in that arrest is simply because of this stand your ground law and the way it was interpreted by both Mr. Zimmerman and the Sanford Police Department.
You've had some talk radio, AM talk radio, really trying to reframe this discussion. How accurate has that been?
I mean, it depends. To what extent do you want to take the word of Mr. Zimmerman's handlers and lawyers and people who are speaking on behalf of him? I'm inclined to agree with and believe in the facts as we know them. We know that he shot Trayvon Martin. We know that Mr. Martin was not suspicious or engaged in any kind of criminal activity. And we know that the stand your ground law has had some challenges and some real serious questions about the use of lethal force. That information to me means that we should arrest Mr. Zimmerman and then proceed with justice. He'll have an opportunity to defend himself in court. His lawyers, instead of speaking on the media, can speak in court. And the same, I think, for the Martin family. They all deserve their day in court to resolve this case.
And of course, the elephant in the room that the pundits don't talk about is if the roles were reversed, and Trayvon was white and the shooter was black, we likely, I think most of us agree, would have seen a much different outcome.
I think so. And I think I just would caution us against, you know, engaging in the race wars, so to speak, and let's just kind of focus on the facts here. They drug tested and background tested the corpse. They did not do either of those for Mr. Zimmerman. You know, the lead investigator on the case did not really believe Mr. Zimmerman's story and wanted to file manslaughter charges. Somehow the state's attorney and chief of police and other folk involved did not go that route. And so why did that happen? So there's certain institutional things that I think we should look at to try to resolve and figure out, you know, can we have justice in this case, regardless of the race of Mr. Martin or Mr. Zimmerman? Where do we resolve this case in the terms of justice and what's right for the family and this case in general?
We're going to take it from Florida to California, where just this week the deadly shooting one go at Oakland University, a Korean Christian college where he pretty much execution style murdered some of his former classmates.
Yeah,
he was a student there and murdered other students.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tragic case. Well, first of all, our heart goes out to the victims and the victims' families for this particular case. My hope is that, you know, we have these horrific shootings periodically over the course of time in our society. And I think it's time for us to stop isolating these incidents and try to think about, why do we live in a world where people think that using lethal force to respond or for retribution about petty grievances is somehow plausible in our society? What are we doing in our society that we're not aware and vigilant about these folks, and that periodically over time these incidences continue to occur?
And Brian mentioned it in some of the front page headlines. There are school shootings all the time. I know in Jacksonville, Florida, a teacher went and shot the headmistress because he had just been fired. Too much violence, too much shootings in schools where you think that's a safe place to be.
Exactly. And I don't think this is just about gun control, although I do think we need to have a national conversation about gun control, because why are unstable people able to have access to guns? It's also just, why are we in a society that is that violent, that endorses the use of lethal force for retribution? We need to really investigate that and think about the ways in which we can not isolate these individual situations, but actually deal with it in a more comprehensive sense.
And of course, you look at other countries, we have much different, like compare Japan with the U.S., and you get a sense of there's a real reason why they don't have firearms, or they're just illegal.
We are exponentially, in terms of firearm crimes and also these kinds of cases, we just outstrip all other modern nations. And so it has to do with some combination of our gun control laws, but also the actual culture of violence in America.
Well, that's not going to change anytime soon, but we're always happy to have you come back and talk about it.
Good to see you.
Thank you for having me this morning.